I think generative AI has got a real potential to level the playing field. Top law firms are going to still be top law firms, but the mid-tier are going to be able to do more. They're going to expand their reach, and so competition is going to intensify.
Welcome to episode 56 of the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast. I'm Tim Bond, founder of techpros.io. Today, we feature a short interview with Jon McClay, who is the Global Director of Strategy and Analytics at Baker McKenzie, a well-known international law firm. Now, Jon participated in a TechPros Thought Leadership program that we're currently running called Navigating AI Transformation at Scale, how global service providers are reimagining value creation. Now, in episode 52, we featured Satish Neelam of Cognizant, and this was part of the same program. Now, one of the industries that I've always thought would be particularly impacted by the emergence of Gen AI is the legal services industry. Like other professional services industries, historic billing models have been based on time spent. And of course, we all know that generative AI significantly reduces the amount of time it takes to perform knowledge work. So I was particularly interested in what Jon had to say about this. His opening comment echoes Satish's perspective on the potential death of enterprise software. Now, I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon, as AI transformation will take time to take effect. But when we have C-level leaders making these statements, it really drives home the reality of the cataclysmic changes we are going to witness in the years ahead. Interestingly, while Jon does see a change in the market dynamics in the legal sector, unlike software, he does not see an existential threat to established global law firms. Let's get into it.
I'm Jon McClay. I'm the Director of Strategy and Analytics at Baker McKenzie, which is a global business law firm.
How is AI beginning to reshape relationships between global service providers and their enterprise clients?
I think if we're talking about technology providers, generative AI is a bit of an existential threat for many of them, in the way in which it was for Google when it first emerged a couple of years ago. The question, I think, for them is if a large language model can do the thing they're doing and do it well, what is the need for their product, right? And I think you've seen a lot of technology service providers scrambling to incorporate generative AI in their service to effectively put a wrapper around the smarts, which are in the large language model, doing that for the share premium and doing that to stay relevant.
Can you just explain what you mean by that, Jon? It's interesting. What do you mean by the smart?
A lot of the generative AI intelligence, which is in solutions from software companies, is essentially just an API call out to OpenAI. When people are saying they're incorporating generative AI, what they're basically saying is we're taking a question that you as a user may have about your data and sending it off to GPT and getting them to answer it. So I think there's a realization that for software solution providers, they're not just competing amongst themselves. If you're a CRM provider, you're not just competing with other CRM providers, you're probably increasingly competing with Microsoft, which is becoming the core operating system for the organization. And I think a lot of corporates are concerned about how much or how many IT solutions they have, and will be asking themselves, do I need this specific service? If we take the example of CRM, do I need a CRM if I can ask my Copilot solution to read my emails, tell me what client meetings I've got coming up, tell me what we've done most recently for them, etc. Now, I happen to think that large companies like Salesforce are probably going to be okay. But there's a lot of small vendors who I think are under a real existential threat. That's for the technology sort of landscape. Now, for firms like my own professional services companies, I think generative AI has got a real potential to level the playing field. I don't know if you saw that experiment that Boston Consulting Group did in conjunction with Harvard about a year or a year and a half ago, where they gave ChatGPT to some of their consultants, and to some they didn't give it, and they gave them all the same strategy exercises to solve. The effect of that was that the good ones remained good, the good consultants were still good, but the average and the lower performing ones came right up in performance terms. And I think the same is going to be true at a macro level in the professional services space, right? The really good firms are going to stay good. law firms are going to still be top law firms, but the mid-tier are going to be able to do more.
Right.
They're going to be able to expand their reach. They're going to be able to, I guess, compete more effectively. And so competition is going to intensify. I think the other interesting thing we're going to see is a shift in the power dynamics between what we call in-house counsel, so the general counsel inside companies who are buying services from law firms like ours, and us. It's going to, I think, change the buying power that they have and change what they use their law firm providers for, right? So a lot of the looking up what is the law and a lot of the more routine queries, if you can get that answer through a screen, do you need to pick up the telephone and talk to your lawyer, to your legal advisor? So again, it's going to make the competition for the premium work, the work that you can't do in that way, a lot more intense, I think.
Very interesting. And then if we think about, so following on really, we're talking about changes in terms of how clients think about and value service delivery. And let's just double click on this a little bit more. Are there any other sort of structural changes that perhaps you can see coming within the legal industry as a result of generative AI?
I think in terms of how they value service delivery, all of the surveys that I've seen suggest that our clients expect us to be using it. There are only a very few that say that they don't want it to be present in the workflow, in our workflow. And that's for risk reasons. They're looking for assurance around information accuracy. I suspect that concern is going to disappear as the model, the ability of retrieval augmented generation to fix on facts gets stronger and stronger. I think the way in which it's going to shift the industry depends on the service type, right? So some of the more routine everyday work that service providers do, I think clients are really going to be laser focused on the efficiency, the automation of that work, the standardization of that work. And within my industry, probably the best example would be commercial contracting. Organization A wants to contract with organization B, paperwork needs to be done. A lot of that already handled in a technology-enabled, automated way. And generative AI is only going to intensify the pressure on that. It's going to translate into an expectation of real low cost, high degrees of automation, and a lot of margin compression. And I think probably there will be some decisions from firms of, do I want to do that? Am I going to cede ground to an alternative legal services provider or technology business in order to do that?
And then when we think of your organization, Baker McKenzie, where would you say you see the most opportunity for AI to add value to?
Well, I was going to come on to say at the other end of the complexity sort of scale, premium services, the big M&A deals, high stakes litigation. I think what clients are going to expect is that if you add generative AI into the workflow, it's not replacing lawyers, but it's augmenting what the lawyers can do. Mm-hmm. It's going to translate into a whole set of expectations about speed and comprehensiveness.
Cost, maybe.
I'm going to say on cost. If you think about today's world, there's a real value for a company that's doing a deal in being able to minimize the elapsed time between when they announce the deal and when they close the deal. So if the markets are whipsawing around, as we've seen in the last few years, there's a lot of volatility. You can't afford to have announced the deal and then have a long lapse period. By the time you've done it, the market may have changed. So if you can compress that time frame, it's valuable to you in really significant terms. Generative AI allows that process, or will enable that process. It'll allow lawyers to do the due diligence more quickly. It'll allow a whole series of processes to happen at pace and probably more comprehensively than they have done before, which I think the client is going to say that's valuable to us because it reduces the uncertainty. It reduces our period of uncertainty with our shareholders and with the street. And I think they will pay for that. And I think that we'll see margins hold there. I don't think we're going to see premium services sold at pence on the pound or whatever because of generative AI. But I think the expectation of what you can do and how quickly you can do it is going to shift, right? We're all used to our timeframes for our projects compressing. It'll be no different, I think, in high value legal work.
Very interesting. But presumably that requires the billing model to change from hourly rates, right? Because if you can do it way faster, whilst I completely see what you're saying, you get a huge amount of value as a customer. The time it takes to get it done is that's fundamentally on how lawyers are billing. So How's the commercial model going to change to address this dynamic?
There's been talk about billing model changing from hourly rates for decades. And what we've seen is the proportion of work that's done at hourly rates is held relatively stable, but the rates themselves have increased. They have risen every year pretty consistently. It's fairly, it's entirely possible or plausible that that continues, and that the amount
you don't think market
the amount you can get done in an hour, expands dramatically. The value of that hour expands dramatically. But I get the point you're saying, which is should the providers, should people like us be looking at what we'd call a sort of a value-based or a fixed fee pricing? And I can assure you, yes, we think that is applicable for certain types of work. Not everything, not necessarily episodic and relatively unique transactions or matters, but certainly for some services is going to expand. And I think AI has taken us to a different level of pressure around that than we've had over the last 2 decades.
I can't help thinking that market dynamics will mean that law firms can take the decision to just increase rates, and therefore ultimately the customers will be paying a similar or maybe a marginally less amount for the work that's being done, given that there's less time that's being invested. But law firms will come in, and of course there's other dynamics around collateral and established brands, and no one's ever been sacked from hiring IBM or Baker McKenzie, for example. But you can't help think, can you, that sort of entrepreneurial lawyers who partners of law firms like Baker McKenzie, they set up these organizations that are AI first and then can do all of this lightning fast, high quality work and undercut the big law firms.
I think let's say the market forces that are pushing in that direction have only intensified as a result of generative AI. But let's not imagine that this is just the first time AI services have appeared on the landscape. The legal industry has been using AI to get its job done for years and years. So large-scale document review, the ability to scan millions of emails as part of a litigation case, AI-powered legal due diligence, again, a document review process using technology to understand what's in the data room, what the risks are. Those have all been around for quite a time. That hasn't turned the industry pricing model on its head. It hasn't resulted in any sort of move away in a substantive way from billable hours. One of the truths that clients will often say, well, we would like to pay for value. We don't like the billable hour, but if we do a fixed fee arrangement, can we also see how many hours you spent on it? And that there is an attachment on both sides of the industry to the billable hour, because it's a way of understanding how much effort has gone into the work product. So I think it increases the pressure to move away. I think time will tell whether I'm right or not, but I think that the expertise and the judgment combined with the generative AI to allow us to do things faster or more comprehensively is going to result in certain high value legal services of the sort that I've mentioned holding their price. I don't think there's a margin expansion opportunity there, but I think there's a sort of a high likelihood that the price will hold. But that's not true across all the services that the industry provides. And if, as I say, for the more everyday services, a lot of our own analysis suggests that the tasks are very amenable to be done by generative AI. And we would expect to see more of a shift at that end of the market.
Yeah, I think another point, of course, is the evolution of the ability of these models to do more and more as we move towards AGI and superintelligence. It's who just knows, but thanks for that. This episode is brought to you by Innate, the leading SaaS solution for business services. Are you struggling with limited visibility and disjointed processes? Innate's orchestration platform helps service providers and BPOs manage work from start to finish with ease. From SLA tracking to advanced reporting, Innate is purpose-built for service delivery. Whether it's automating tasks, coordinating human and digital teams, or ensuring services are delivered on time, everything runs from one simple platform. Tried and tested by TMF, EY, and other leading service providers, Innate has helped businesses unlock over £32 million in savings. Visit innate.io to learn more. Got here, what measurable benefits have you seen from your AI initiatives so far? And any anecdotes or anything you'd like to share on that?
As I said, we've been using AI as part of delivering services for a while, and it's pretty integral to how we do some of those big deals and big litigation matters. I think what we're seeing is that we can see the evidence in our new matters that we're opening up in our new work coming on board, that we have lots of client wins that are directly attributable to our knowledge of generative AI as a topic with legal risk and legal opportunities associated with it. So we spend quite a bit of time advising clients on AI governance and risk management around their own deployments of generative AI. Company says, like a governance framework, or I'm thinking of enhancing my product in this particular way. What are the risks? What are my obligations, etc.? That is a rapidly growing area of work. But the other is that we deploy AI in our workflow alongside our lawyers in order to solve client problems. So a good example, and an example actually you can look up. It was mentioned in the American Lawyer last December, where our Chief Innovation Officer Ben Algrove and the chair of our cyber and data practice, Brian Hengesbaugh, were talking about how they're using AI to win work and solve client problems around data breaches. So we very often with data breaches, there are a whole series of reporting obligations that are triggered and have very short windows in order to be completed. And if you're a large organization operating in lots of different jurisdictions, the number of these obligations and the difference between what you have to say in this US state versus that US state versus in Europe, I mean that it's really quite difficult to get across. So we use generative AI together with our own playbook of what those rules are. In other words, the proprietary reference information on what clients should do in order to deliver that service really quickly for a client. And that's a great example of knowing about AI, the obligations, using AI, using that in order to deliver a service that meets the client's obligation or meets the client's expectation for speed, accuracy, and making sure that they stay compliant in those high-risk situations. So that's the sort of thing that I think I would single out as how it's making a difference to our work.
If we talk about data, which is, of course, the oil for AI, right? Gen AI is worthless and useless without high-quality, relevant, up-to-date data and well-organized data. So the question I've really got here is, as Baker McKenzie's is building its Gen AI and embracing AI, its capabilities, how have you been approaching that sort of data piece? What foundational improvements, perhaps, in your kind of infrastructure did you need, or are you? What can you share on that topic?
I think the first thing to say is if you're not on the cloud already or in the cloud, I think you can forget it with generative AI, right? I do not know, or I cannot even begin to imagine how you would start to try to incorporate generative AI if your data is fragmented across a whole series of on-prem services, little information silos. I think getting it into the cloud and getting it into a single solution in the cloud has got to be step number one before you do anything else. And you would recommend, if you're not there, do that first. I think the other thing that really accelerates the ability to use it is process standardization. Whether you're talking about the back office within professional services firms, or whether you're talking about the different practice areas themselves, having a global practice group structure, having consistent standards of what excellent looks like for how we do how we do an M&A deal, how we do an investigation globally, and the information sources that we rely on for that, again, that makes a huge difference. The same thing in the back office, right? If you've done the work of saying, how do your support services get delivered from service centers through standard processes, and you're logging the requests and you're measuring the volume and you know what the process steps are, you're just in so much better position to start exploiting generative AI than if you've got a sort of cottage industry structure, as I like to call it.
It's great answer.
I think that's probably the main thing, because a lot of these services are going to be now a combination of a sort of an offshore person plus machine. So if I'm thinking about solutions, there's stuff that gets done in city center locations, but there's also stuff that is a back office process, like a finance function, for example. And if you're looking at generative AI benefits, it's what is the client facing service, but it's how do we make that, what goes on in the factory. So definitely having gone through the work of figuring out what your key processes are and measuring them and quantifying them, it makes it much easier to figure out where you deploy this stuff.
how are you helping your clients understand and measure the value of AI enhanced services? And we did touch on this at the beginning, didn't we, around reduced process cycle time, the amount of time it takes to get
a lot
the
of what
information
we do here is less about helping them understand how AI is helping us be a better provider to them, but is much more about the role that AI plays in their business transformation. So it is an extraordinary technology full of all sorts of opportunities, but also risk, as we're beginning to see, right? So we're seeing intellectual property-based court cases. We're seeing that there are liability issues around how AI may be affecting an organization's compliance with privacy or with
100%.
employment law, whether there's bias in there. We're seeing
DORA,
that AI...
We've got DORA, we've got the EU AI
Right.
Act. There's lots of it, isn't there?
So that new set of regulations is very recent as well. So I think when you look at all of this, not to mention AI has become an asset class and can be bought, and you need to understand what's valuable and what's not, and clients have that concern as well. So we spend a lot of time advising clients across their obligations, how to deal with IP issues, data governance issues, how to execute transactions that got AI components as part of the asset that the client is buying. And that's really, I think, the main thing that we do, right? And a lot of our attributes as a firm, our global reach, our good ranking and reputation in the data space are playing into this really strongly. So I would say we see that this is probably the main way in which we're helping clients get value from AI, helping them do it safely, helping them buy it smartly, helping them deploy it smartly.
Very good. Excellent.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Have a lovely weekend. All the best. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So that wraps up episode 56. It was great to hear a perspective on the impact of Gen AI on the legal sector. So thank you, Jon, for sharing your insights and also for participating in our thought leadership program on AI transformation at scale for service providers. And thank you to our sponsor, Innate, as well. I look forward to featuring more of our techpros.io interviewees on the podcast. We have live interview programs running in the media and entertainment sector, finance, HR, and marketing, and we'll certainly share the best of these as they emerge. Please check back next week where Taryn, our content director, and I will be discussing Gen AI upskilling with a focus on the latest tools and techniques that are working and some of the incredible results that are being realized through pilots and steps that you can take to accelerate your AI transformation journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Check back in next week. Thanks so much.